Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Pammy's on the end of the buttons today, so anything could happen. So the reason we've done that is because we've gone to a different program. Well, not a different program, but we're not starting with dovetails and a small box program or anything that involves putting dovetails together. So
that's to start with anyway.
So what we've done is we've rearranged our workshop a little bit. I've pushed the lathe back against the wall and I've put our monitors right over against there, and I've got this huge great open space in the middle of the workshop so that we can do a little bit of furniture building. And during the program, what you'll do is you'll see me wandering around all over the place, and there's various machines around here that I have to use during the process of building this project. So you're just going to have to bear with me. I'm going to have the dust extractor going, so I'll be wandering off over there, and I'll be wandering around here and doing various different things just to go through this program of building Pammy's new sewing table. Actually, basically what it is it's the table that will house the sewing machine to be able to move around the sewing room. In the past, what I've done is I've built a table or two tables. Both those tables are mobile; they're on wheels. We've painted them white, and we've got this lovely top on them, which you can purchase at Bunnings. And we're going to sort of try and replicate that. So the table will be, and it may look small while we're building it, but it's going to end up on wheels at the end of it, and she'll be able to move it around the room wherever she wants to sit and sew. So that's basically the idea behind it. Now, we came up with this little sketch thing. Remember last time we had, I think in the last project, we had a little pink piece. It was a bit too small. This time we've got a bigger piece of paper, a few more scribbles and scratches, and then from that I've converted that into what's you can see on our whiteboard. Right now it's rough, and like we always do, we build things without purchasing a plan or anything like that. We'll develop it ourselves and put it together. So basically that's what we're doing. So it's a frame. It's got top and bottom rails on three sides. It's got a rail in the front, and of course it hasn't got a rail in the front here because it's Pam needs to get her feet underneath there. But it looks a little bit flimsy, but it'll have corner braces in the top here as well. So there's a number of bits and pieces that are going to be added to it while we're on the process. But that's the simple basic idea of how we're going to get around getting this thing the right height and mobile. Now it's going to have a drop side as well. So if you've seen drop side tables before, they have a hinge off the edge and they'll drop a leaf down here. Now the reason for that is the table is the machine is quite a wide machine. It's 600 millimeters long, so it's quite long. So we're going to make the table top 800 millimeters long, and then we're going to have a 400 millimeter swinging flap that will drop side, which will move up. So added to our frame, we're going to have a little framework piece that's that will support the drop side. So we're going to do that as well. So it's a little bit complicated, but we're going to start with the simple part just by building the frame. Now, when we're doing this, towards the end of the program, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we're going to use the dovetail jig for a little part of it, and I'm not going to say what it is just yet, so you just have to watch, stay focused. I know it's pretty hard, but stay focused, and we'll get that little bit at the end of it sorted with the dovetail jig. Now, but basically, mortise and tenon joints for all of the things. We're going to use a blind mortise and tenon. We're going to haunch the top one just a little bit so that we've got a flat top on it, and the bottom one's going to be the full width of the board. Now, mortise and tenon joints, traditionally they are generally 1/3 the thickness, or the tenons are generally 1/3 the thickness of your board. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to go a little bit wider than that, just to give it a bit more strength, because as I said before, Pam's going to be pushing this thing around the table, around the room, and we want to make sure that it's strong enough to withstand bumping into something or other. So we'll try that. We'll do that for a start. Now, what I did was, and I've forgotten where I put it, and this is something that I always advocate: do a couple of test cuts or a couple of test joints. Now, this piece of timber here is an off-cut off one of the legs. I've got the timber there, I'll show it to you in a second. This is just an off-cut off one of the legs, and it's got a knot here that was interfering with some of the work that's needed. As well as that, there was a little bit of a split there. Now, I'm using radiata pine. Now, I'm not a big fan of radiata pine, but it's relatively soft and easy to cut. And we're going to paint it, so it's not going to be seen as radiata pine. The top will be a different matter, but the radiata, it's adequate for this job, and you can pick up relatively good radiata from any of your hardware stores. So what I do before I start a job is I'll inspect the timber, make sure it's pretty good, and then I will cut myself some test joints, and that's what I've done here. Now, I've used two different methods to cut the tenons, and I'm going to show you what they are. There's actually three that I'm going to sort of look at today. And so we just have our mortise and tenon that will go like that, and of course that'll be a rail, and then there'll be another one out here and so forth. So we just cut ourselves a tenon, and of course the second one's a little bit better, a little bit more snug. You don't want to be bashing that in there. If you have to bash it in, well then obviously you haven't cut enough off, so it means you get back to work and make your tenon a little bit thinner. Now, normally when you cut these, like I said before, the normal width of your tenon is 1/3 of the thickness of that. Now, I've gone a little bit more than that because I only want a small shoulder on there. I don't need to have a big shoulder to cover up any of the joints, because the joints are going to be really nicely cut using the technique that I'll show you later. So
you're saying
I've made it a little bit wider.
That's going to be deeper?
No, it's going to be what it is. Normally it's 1/3 the thickness of a piece of timber.
Yep.
So that's the normal rule of thumb. Now, when you're cutting mortise and tenons, you always cut your mortise first, and then you cut your tenon to fit, if you're not going to stick with the 1/3 rule, right? So I'm not going to cut a test one. I've done that. I'm going to actually go through it. Well, actually I might cut a test one. I've got a piece of timber here. Okay, so let's cut a test one in this piece of wood that I've got already cut here. So let's go over to the bench and have a little play over here. As you can see, I'm going to be wandering around all over the place. The traditional technique of cutting these is do your marking out. And because I'm not going to stick with traditional, I'm going to show you the way I go around it. I'll just have to get a couple of tools. So that square, and I've got a pencil. I think I've got enough bits and pieces here. Now, traditional way of cutting a mortise is the first thing is to work out the thickness of your timber. Now we're going to cut that at this size. Eventually it's going to be down to 60 mil, but for this exercise, this is one of the techniques that we use. So I'll just line that up like so, and draw myself a line on there, and I'll square that line across. You can see I've already done it on that side there. Now I want the mortise on this side, and so with my piece of timber is going to sit in here. Now it depends on where you want that piece of timber to go through, right? Blind dovetail will only go part the way through.
Blind.
A blind, sorry, not a blind dovetail, a blind mortice and tenon, blind tenon will go all the way through. We'll go part the way through. We don't want a through tenon because we're not going to go all the way through the piece of timber, because we've got one bit going this way and the other bit's coming through the other way. We don't want them to meet. Wouldn't matter if they did, but it takes away a little bit of the strength. So line up where you want things to go, right? Now, my rule of thumb for this one here, I want the piece of timber on the right hand side of it, or close to the edge, and then I'm going to take a chamfer off the end of that before we actually assemble everything, so I want enough room there to be able to take a chamfer and not interfere with the joint. So my piece of timber is 19mm thick. So if I set that about there, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do that at 25mm over the inside edge. There, 10, 25. Now if I sit that on there, just on that mark, because I've got 19mm, I should have a 6mm spacing on the side here, which is what it is. Right? So there's my 6mm. Now the end of my piece of timber is square, so something that you need to make sure, square, start square. Now that's where my piece of timber is going to sit. Once I've cut my tenon, then I will cut my mortise, I will then cut the tenon to fit what I do here. So small amount of material off each edge. So I'm not going to take a third off, I'm just going to take a small amount off. I don't want a big shoulder on it. And that's adequate to give me enough support and to give a shoulder and to hide anything that happens in here. And then what I need to do is set my marking gauge. So I have my marking gauge set on those two marks. Alright. Set my mark on here. Set and I'll adjust the marking gauge to sit on those two on that mark. So the end spike will sit on this mark here. And then I can adjust the block up and down the shaft however I want it, however I need it. Okay, so I'll just lift that up a little bit. And then it's just a matter of running my mark down through there. That's where my tenon is going to be. 5mm from the end. So the little haunch is on the end here. Square my line across. So, and then what's going to be removed is all this material in here. Okay. Now, the general technique for using that or by hand tool is to get yourself the reasonable chisels. I have a mallet, that's it. Now, the funny thing, I had I made a mallet out of radiata. Now, people would go, why would you make a mallet out of radiata pine? It's so light, it's soft, but I've made it in such a way that I can put it back on the lathe and I can trim off any damage that might occur on it. As you can see, there's not a lot of damage on it. There's a little bit of damage on it, but it's actually designed so that I can repair it if I have to load it down the track. It doesn't matter if it gets damaged or anything. So all I need to do is, and I'm not hitting the timber hard, so I really don't need something really, really heavy.
Some things do need a light touch, don't they?
Yeah. Particularly if you're carving. Now I've done a little bit of carving and I don't necessarily need to hit the chisel hard. Now this is radiata pine. The chisel. This is radiata pine. The chisel's got enough weight in it to be able to do things with it. Now if I wanted to hit it hard, I'd probably get a mallet like this, which is made of hardwood, and then I can take out as much as I like. Fairly hard, fairly heavy, but my little radiata, simple, easy to make. Turn them up on the lathe.
Let's see what you've done.
Haven't got anything out of it yet. All I'm doing is just cutting away, and this is the long way of doing it, right? So now, one of the things that I've spoken to people about in the past, I often see this happening. Just let me get rid of this little bit of material off here first. The thing that you need to remember about chisels is they're a cutting tool. They're not a crowbar. They're not a lever. And I often see people knock the chisel in and then lever the piece of timber out. And it makes my skin crawl actually, because it's a cutting tool. It's designed to cut things, and so you should use it as a cutting tool. Incidentally, if you didn't see that before, I've come down the sides of my mark here quite nice, because nice and straight, because the marking gauge actually created a little hollow. Okay, so it made a cut along the grain there, which will help you get a nice clean shoulder on your joint. And so it's just a matter of keep working until you've got it out of there, right? Okay, so now that would probably take me half an hour, 3/4 of an hour to cut out enough material to be able to put a tenon in there, right? That takes a little bit too long, right? For me, I like to get things done quickly. You can see we've got nice, clean, sharp edges. Things are going to sit nicely. And so we go through the process of actually taking the material out of there, bit by bit. If you don't have equipment to do it, what we could do is we could take it over to the drill press, and then we could drill the majority of that out with a large size drill, which presume most of you are already saying, why didn't you take it over with the drill? Some people don't have a drill, right? So I could drill it all out and then I could tidy it up with my chisel afterwards. That would work as well, right? So that's technique number 2. Technique number 3 is this thing here that I have behind me. Now, this is a chisel mortiser. And the thing about the chisel mortiser, I've got this already set up by the way, is it will cut me, oops, I've done this the wrong way, no, I didn't, it's the right way. It will cut my mortise out nice and square in one go. Now, I use a chisel mortiser, and this is what they work with. This is what the chisel looks like. The chisel is very sharp, and you need to keep it sharp, and that's just by sharpening as per normal. So I would get on a stone and I would clean the edges like so. Very rarely there is any need on a good quality mortise chiseler to do any filing or honing of the inside edge. You should be able to clean it up just by working on the outside edges of your mortiser. So making it a little bit smaller, it's not going to make a great deal of difference to your mortising, but you've got to keep them nice and sharp. Now, the way it works is it has a drill bit that goes down the centre. Now, the drill bit, as you can see, it's quite hefty. It's got good cutting teeth on it, and it fits inside like so, and it will cut like that. Right? Now, how it fits into the machine, let me open up that little chisel mortiser. You can see in here,
Well, maybe it's a bit see.
maybe you can see it, you might be able to. You can see there's a drill bit type mechanism. So the drill bit goes up into here, and then the chisel fits into this little spigot on the bottom here, and it's held in by an Allen key. Okay, so it's quite nice, and when you turn it on, that's what you get. So nothing moves on the outside except for the drill bit on the inside. And when we cut, it will cut. It just drills it out, and what you're doing is using the chisel to cut down there. There is a stop on the other side here that actually stops it to go to the correct depth. I've got it set at 35mm, so that's the depth I want to go. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now it's just a matter of moving sideways a little bit, and we continue our cut. I'll go for a little bit more. Okay, so we go the last little bit. reason is releasing right at the end of the cut is just cutting into the other test joint that I did on the other side. Now it's just a matter of go back over that just to tidy up. As you can see, we've come through to the other one on the other side, but basically that's our mortise cut. And as you can see, a little bit rough down the bottom, but that's only because of the way it cuts. Just a matter of tidying that up. But you can see we've got lovely clean edges on both sides. Even though we cut them with the chisel, we've still got those lovely clean edges. And now it's just a matter of cutting a tenon to fit. So cut your mortise first, and then cutting your tenon. Now, cutting a tenon, there's a couple of techniques that we're going to use for that as well. So the first one is mark your tenon out. Now, we used our marking gauge to cut. I don't want to undo the settings on that because, so I'll do it by hand. Because it's set for the other leg that I've done 3 legs, and I just want to make sure they're all the same when I cut it. So I'm going to do this by hand. The first thing is mark it. So set the piece of timber where it's going to fit on the tenon, on the mortise. Mark the inside. Now I normally get my marking gauge and I would go straight across there, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use my square. Once you get practice at doing this, you'll find it's quite a simple task. Now, the depth that I want to go, 35mm. Incidentally, you make sure your piece of timber is already square before you start this. Something I would neglect to say right at the beginning. Okay, so what I need to do is remove these cheeks off here. And there's a number of ways of doing that. The simplest way is do it by hand. So what we can do, get a bench hook. Set my piece of timber on there where I need to cut. Now, I've got 2 different saws here. This one is a ripping saw, so if I'm ripping along the grain, it's a little easier to do. So the Veritas ones, they're quite good for this. Little ripping blade. And the other one is a cross cut. Okay, so basically when I'm cutting across the grain, okay. The tooth setup is a little bit different. I'm not going to go into an explanation as to what it is, but basically what I'm going to do now is just use my crosscut saw. sides. And then I'll take my ripping saw and I'll cut the cheek off. Rip saw. As you can see, that's going to take forever. And if you're not confident with your saw, it's going to take you a little while, and you may not get it straight. Okay, but if you have a bandsaw, we can take it to the bandsaw, and we can take. Might have to bring it around here, mate. Now, as Pam's doing a little dance around the bandsaw, I can sit my piece of timber on the bandsaw. Now, if you're doing a lot of these, what you can do is put a little stop at the other side here. Just lock that in place. Just like that. Just waiting for that to stop, so it's starting to make a noise. And so, what we'll do now, just cut off that little bit. Cut the wrong saw. Okay, so now we have a tenon. Now the difficulty with that is probably won't fit the hole that I just cut, which was that way. Well, it's not too bad. Okay, so it fits reasonably well. Probably need to trim it up a little bit, so I can do that with a chisel, or I can go back to the bandsaw and reset the bandsaw. And just take a little trim off it. I don't want to take too much off. Back to my bench. Okay, so that's going to fit really nicely. All I need to do now is cut off the haunch. That's all. Got a mess on the bench already, and I've only just started. Now I'm never too fussy about how I cut down this bit. Doesn't really matter. Depends on how tight you want your joint to be. Chisel and just tidy that corner up. And we'll see if it fits. Take a little bit more off. So. Run that off with the chisel. So as you can see, that's taken me a little while just to make one mortise of tenon, and I've used a little machine to do that. Quite difficult, quite a long process. If you don't have electrical machines to actually do this process, then of course you're going to have to use this process that I'm using now, or a process similar. Okay, so a little bit more effort and that will go through into there. So that'll be a nice mortise and tenon. Actually it's quite snug. Probably need to take a little more off the back edge of that. Got to push it in a bit too tight. So that's your technique, and unfortunately it's not quick if you don't have electrical tools to help you. Now, we box makers who use the Gifkins jig have, I'm going to do the other end of the timber, we have tools to make dovetails, right? So this is what we do. Well, I do anyway. In my router, I have the tenon cutter. Right, I've got that in there. I've got it set to the right thickness. It's set to this one here. It's a long process to get it set up. I've also put up my fence with the dust extractor on it, because this makes quite a bit of dust, particularly with radiata. I don't particularly like it, but so we have to have the dust extractor on it. Now, I'm going to go and turn it on in a sec. Now, what I did before we started was I made this tenon with this router bit set up exactly the same way as I've got it cut here, right? So my fence is set so that I get my 35mm depth. The height is cut so that I will cut enough material off the cheeks of each of the tenons. So what we're going to do is we'll cut that. Now, what I've done here is on the end of the table I have a stop that will stop at the right thickness, so I can move the table there, because the width of the cutter isn't as wide as the cut we're going to make, and so what will happen is we'll end up with a little bit on the end that we have to take off. So what we can do is we can take a little piece off first, and then we can just keep moving it back, and then when it gets back to our stop, we'll have exactly the right thick, right amount of material taken off our 35mm here. So bear with me, I'll just go and turn the dust extractor on. Now I haven't marked anything on the piece of timber, basically because I don't have to. I've done all the marking out by setting up my machinery and my equipment. So I'll go and turn the dust extractor on. I hope it's not too noisy for you. These on. Just using a piece of scrap as a push block on the other side. So that fits in there perfectly well. It's just a matter of taking off the excess on the top of it, and that will fit in there quite nicely, okay, quite easily. Now that's the easy way of making your tenons, and they're perfectly flat. Got nice clean shoulders on them, and it'll come up quite nice. So what I'm going to do, I've got 15 minutes left, I'm going to show you how I've set up everything on the legs. What I've done with the legs of these, this is the legs. I've cut the top tenons, the top mortises, and the bottom mortises for 3 of the legs. There's one of my rails, and the one I'll just pop straight in like so. Now, that's not launched or anything like that, it will go in, it's not a problem. My other one will go on top of there. The front, that's the other back leg, and this is the front leg. Take this out of here. I'll take the dusty off in a moment. Okay, and this is how I'll set up my legs. So first of all, I'll set them on the floor. And this is the reason that we've got all this space here, is to fiddle around doing things on the floor. I had 4 legs. Oh, the other one's over on the bench there. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Front, that's 2, how do I know they all go like that? Is because, if you just come in here, Pammy, when you set your legs together like so, it doesn't look very big, but once I've got wheels on it, it's going to sit up a little higher. It's measured off the existing ones. On the top of it, back leg, front leg. There's 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, 3 goes to 4. Right? So I've got them all marked out exactly how I want them to do. And what I did is I looked for the nicest bits on the inside, because on the outside, so that the inside bits, the rough stuff, you know, it's going to be painted anyway, so it really doesn't matter. So Then we have to work out where our rails are going to be. So I've got two rails, one on top and one on bottom on there. I've got one on the top on this side. I've got top and bottom there, top and bottom there, and I've cut those to suit. So top, bottom, and this is the top one here. Now I haven't cut this one. Okay, so I need to mark out how to cut this, and then I'm going to go through the process of cutting it up for you. So I've got to have a top rail here, a top rail here, and a bottom rail down that side there. So let me put those aside. I hope you can follow this. I seem to be all over the place today. It's just a new project, new shop, set up and so on. Okay. So my marking out gauge. And the front one has to go on there. So it's a matter of, I don't really need to do this, but it's always a good reminder. Just set my marking gauge like so, and I had a pencil. I don't have a pencil anymore. Just make sure I mark along there. The marking gauge will actually give me a mark. And I do that so that I know that that's the bit I've got to cut off. Right, so that's the top. And then we turn it over here, and I've got to mark on this side here because it's the outside of the post. Turn it around so I can get it. And this one down here. Marking it so that I know exactly where I've got to cut. No confusion. There and there. Okay. I don't know what I did there. I didn't do that very well. Let's redo it. Mark my 1/2 inch, or sorry, my 10mm on the top. Square. Okay, so that'll be the stop for that. Stop for that. That'll be there. And this one I'm not going to haunch that, I'm just going to have it so that the whole piece of timber will fit straight inside that there. There's no need for me to put a little haunch on either side. I could do that just to cover up the edges. If you're cutting it by hand, it is a good idea, because often what you'll do is you'll end up rounding over the end here. If you make the mistake of trying to leave the timber out of there, you'll round over this top and bottom edges here, and it will look a bit ordinary. So if you make it a bit shorter, and you do round over that corner and that corner, you need to haunch both, or cut a little step in the top and bottom of your rail. But because we're using the mortising machine, it's going to be nice and square, nice and clean, so I can pop that in there without a problem. So over to the mortising machine. What I'm doing, just going to line that up with the bottom line. place. Make sure we're going flat. Lock it in nice and tight so it doesn't go anywhere. And we can start cutting. The mortising machine makes it so much easier. And it's just a matter of just dress it up. The bottom of the hole is a little bit, or the bottom of the tenon, the mortise is a little bit rough and ready because of the way it chisels it out and because of the type of timber that I'm using. If I was using better quality timber, probably would get a better result.
But you don't see it anyway.
That's correct. Okay. So as you can see in the hole there, it's quite nice, quite a neat hole. Okay, so now it's just a matter of popping it in the other end, the other side. Once you have this all set up, it's just a simple task of actually cutting. More. More. Just lining up at the edge of the chisel. Knock it in. First one was generally the hardest, basically because it's having to pull all the material out with the chisel, with the drill bit, and you have to cut down the sides as well. Next one's a little easier because there's a bit of free room there for the sawdust to get away. Now I haven't asked Jimmy Carroll if he sells these mortising machines, but I'm sure if you wanted one or wanted to purchase one, I'm sure he could chase one up for you without a drought. I haven't put the mockers on you, Jimmy, but it's a very simple, easy machine to use. It's just a matter of making sure that your chisels are nice and sharp. Normally I've got a little dust extractor thing to go, but it gets in the way. Just tidying up along the hole. This one is in here. This way. Having everything set up makes it so much easier. Locking in. Sawdust around the place. Cut half of one here. Just got a little adjustment to do here. You can just hear a little bit of sawdust getting caught in the chisel. Not too concerned about it, it doesn't hurt anything. Now there's a little bit of flotsam and jetsam in there. All I'm doing is just scraping along the bottom. I'm not actually using this as a lever. Scraping out the little bits and pieces. We go back to the bench. There's the end cut off it. And there you have, actually that's the wrong one. You have a nice fitting tenon. Okay, so that's what we're trying to achieve. We're going to do that with all the rest of them. Now we've run out of time, so what I'll do next week, we'll see where I get to. I've got to cut all the rails. Okay, so once I get all the rails cut, we can then cut all the tenons, and get everything fitting nicely. What I want to do beforehand is just clean off a lot of the markings that I've put on here, and just make it look a little bit prettier, so that I don't have all those markings. I'll do a bit of sanding. We'll take the chamfers off the corners, and then I'll show you how I'm going to attach the feet to the bottom of it, or attach the wheels. I haven't purchased the wheels yet, but we will go and get them, and I'll show you how they're going to attach, because they've got to be attached a particular way, so that it's good and strong. Putting screws into end grain doesn't always work very well unless you have really long screws, but we don't want to do that. We just want to make it look nice. And then we'll look at the corner braces and how we're going to fit the tops. Now, fitting the tops, we're going to use buttons to do that rather than screw the whole thing together. So we've got to have a little bit of movement in the whole framework. So we'll see how that goes. We'll even talk about, or have a look at, pinning the dovetail, the mortise and tenons. Okay, dovetails on the brain. Pinning the mortise and tenons. That's a technique that's really good if you're very short of timber. So we'll talk about that as well. So hopefully you're going to enjoy this project, and we'll catch you all next week. Now, if you are not subscribed just yet, please subscribe. Make it easy for yourself, because we'll let you know when we're going to be on the air again. So we'll see you all next week.